Fundamental attribution error is a psychological phenomenon that reveals the profound mistakes we make in judging others. It's astonishing how often we attribute someone's behavior to their character rather than considering the situation they're in. By exploring this concept, you'll discover how a single misunderstanding can radically change the way you see yourself and those around you. One of the key frameworks that helps explain why we tend to attribute others' behavior to their character rather than the situation is the theory of correspondent inference, developed by Edward Jones and Victor Harris in 1967. This theory suggests that when we observe someone's behavior, we tend to infer that their actions reflect their underlying dispositions or personality traits. For instance, if we see someone cutting in line, our initial reaction might be to think that they're rude or inconsiderate, rather than considering the possibility that they might be late for a critical appointment or experiencing an emergency. This correspondent inference theory highlights how our minds automatically make connections between behavior and character, often without sufficient evidence. Another significant psychologist who contributed to our understanding of fundamental attribution error is Lee Ross, who coined the term itself in 1977. Ross's work emphasized how this error is not just a minor quirk, but a pervasive and systematic bias that affects our social perceptions. He demonstrated through various experiments that people tend to overestimate the role of personality and underestimate the impact of situational factors when explaining others' behavior. One fascinating study that illustrates this point is the famous prison experiment conducted by Philip Zimbardo in 1971. In this study, healthy college students were randomly assigned to play the roles of prisoners and guards in a simulated prison environment. The results were startling despite the fact that these students were normal, well-adjusted individuals. They quickly began to exhibit extreme behaviors, with guards displaying sadistic tendencies and prisoners showing signs of mental breakdown. This study powerfully demonstrates how situational factors can dramatically influence behavior, often more so than personality traits. Yet, when we observe such behaviors in real life, our default tendency is to attribute them to the person's character rather than considering the situational context. This is a classic example of the fundamental attribution error in action. Initially, researchers focused on demonstrating the existence and prevalence of this bias. However, more recent studies have begun to investigate the cognitive mechanisms underlying this error, such as the role of mental shortcuts, biases in information processing, and the influence of cultural norms. For example, research by psychologists like Susan Fiske and Stephen Newberg has shown that when we encounter someone new, our brains rapidly categorize them into social groups, which can trigger stereotypical thinking and reinforce the fundamental attribution error. This highlights the complex interplay between cognitive biases, social context, and cultural factors in shaping our perceptions of others. In everyday life, recognizing and overcoming the fundamental attribution error can have a profound impact on our relationships, communication, and overall well-being. By becoming more aware of this bias and actively seeking to consider situational factors, we can develop more empathy and understanding towards others. For instance, instead of assuming that a colleague is lazy because they're consistently late, we might try to understand the challenges they're facing, such as transportation issues or family responsibilities. As we delve deeper into the complexities of fundamental attribution error, it's crucial to explore how this bias intersects with other cognitive biases and heuristics that influence our social perceptions. One such intersection is with the concept of actor-observer bias, which suggests that when we observe others' behavior, we tend to attribute their actions to their character, but when we reflect on our own behavior, we are more likely to blame situational factors. This dichotomy highlights the dynamic nature of fundamental attribution error, demonstrating how our attributions can shift depending on whether we're observing ourselves or others. Research by psychologists like Richard Nisbett and Timothy Wilson has shown that this actor-observer bias is closely related to fundamental attribution error, as both biases involve a disparity in how we attribute causes to behavior. Another significant aspect of fundamental attribution error is its relationship with cultural norms and values. Studies have found that people from individualistic cultures, such as the United States, tend to exhibit a stronger fundamental attribution error bias than those from collectivist cultures, like many Asian societies. This suggests that cultural background can influence how we perceive and interpret others' behavior, with individualistic cultures placing greater emphasis on personal responsibility and character. The work of psychologists like Hazel Marcus and Shinobu Kitayama has been instrumental in highlighting these cultural differences, demonstrating how our attributions are shaped by the societal norms and values we are immersed in. For example, in collectivist cultures, behaviors might be more often attributed to situational factors or group dynamics rather than individual character. In recent years, researchers have also begun to explore the neural correlates of fundamental attribution error, using neuroimaging techniques like functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, to examine how brain activity patterns change when we engage in attributions. Studies by scientists like Chris Frith and Jutta Frith have found that regions of the brain involved in social cognition, such as the medial prefrontal cortex, show increased activity when we're making attributions about others' behavior. These findings provide valuable insights into the cognitive mechanisms underlying fundamental attribution error, suggesting that this bias may be rooted in the way our brains process social information. By understanding these neural mechanisms, researchers can develop more targeted interventions aimed at reducing the impact of fundamental attribution error on our social interactions and relationships. One such intervention is attributional retraining, a therapeutic approach that involves teaching individuals to consider alternative explanations for others' behavior rather than defaulting to character-based attributions. Research by psychologists like Karen Moser and her colleagues has demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach in reducing fundamental attribution error and improving interpersonal relationships. In everyday life, recognizing and challenging our own fundamental attribution error biases can have a profound impact on how we interact with others. For instance, when encountering someone who is behaving in a way that seems rude or inconsiderate, we might take a step back and try to consider the situational factors that could be contributing to their behavior. By doing so, we can develop more empathy and understanding towards others, leading to more positive and constructive social interactions. Consider a scenario where you're working on a team project and one of your colleagues is consistently late to meetings. Your initial reaction might be to attribute their tardiness to laziness or lack of responsibility. However, by taking a more nuanced approach and considering situational factors such as transportation issues or family obligations, you can develop a more empathetic understanding of their behavior and work together to find solutions that accommodate everyone's needs. One such intersection is with the concept of confirmation bias, which suggests that we tend to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs and attributions about others. This can create a self-reinforcing cycle, where our initial attribution about someone's behavior is reinforced by subsequent observations, even if those observations are incomplete or inaccurate. Research by psychologists like Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky has shown that confirmation bias can exacerbate fundamental attribution error, leading us to overestimate the role of character in shaping others' behavior. For example, if we initially attribute someone's success to their innate talent, we may subsequently seek out information that confirms this attribution, such as their achievements or awards, while ignoring or downplaying information that contradicts it, such as their hard work or luck. Another important aspect of fundamental attribution error is its relationship with power dynamics and social status. Studies have found that people in positions of power or high social status are more likely to exhibit fundamental attribution error, attributing others' behavior to their character rather than situational factors. This can lead to a lack of empathy and understanding towards those who are less powerful or of lower social status. The work of psychologists like Susan Fiske and Peter Glick has been instrumental in highlighting these power dynamics, demonstrating how our attributions are shaped by the social context and our relative position within it. For instance, In a workplace setting, a manager may attribute an employee's mistakes to their lack of ability or character, rather than considering situational factors such as inadequate training or resources. In addition to its intersection with other cognitive biases and power dynamics, fundamental attribution error has also been explored in the context of emotional intelligence and empathy. Research by psychologists like Daniel Goleman and Simon Baron-Cohen has shown that individuals with higher emotional intelligence are better able to consider alternative explanations for others' behavior rather than defaulting to character-based attributions. This ability to take others' perspectives and consider situational factors is closely related to the concept of theory of mind, which refers to our capacity to attribute mental states, such as beliefs and intentions, to ourselves and others. Individuals with stronger theory of mind abilities are better able to navigate complex social situations and avoid fundamental attribution error. Consider a scenario where you're interacting with a customer service representative who seems rude or unhelpful. Your initial reaction might be to attribute their behavior to their poor character or lack of training. However, by taking a more nuanced approach and considering situational factors, such as high stress levels or inadequate resources, you can develop a more empathetic understanding of their behavior and work together to find a solution that meets your needs. Therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, have also been effective in reducing fundamental attribution error and improving interpersonal relationships. By teaching individuals to recognize and challenge their own biased attributions, CBT can help people develop more balanced and nuanced views of others' behavior. Researchers like Aaron Beck and David Clark have developed CBT-based interventions that specifically target fundamental attribution error, with promising results in terms of improved social functioning and reduced conflict. In conclusion, our exploration of fundamental attribution error has revealed a profound insight into the human psyche, our tendency to overestimate the role of character and underestimate the impact of situational factors in shaping others' behavior. This cognitive bias has far-reaching implications for our relationships, social interactions, and overall well-being. By recognizing and challenging our own biased attributions, we can develop more empathy, understanding, and nuanced views of those around us. As we navigate the complexities of modern life, it's essential to remember that people's behaviors are often the result of an intricate interplay between character, circumstances, and context. By acknowledging this complexity, we can foster more constructive social interactions, build stronger relationships, and cultivate a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. Ultimately, the awareness of fundamental attribution error invites us to embrace a more compassionate and realistic approach to human nature, one that acknowledges the dynamic interplay between individual characteristics and situational factors. That's all for today's Psych with Sigmund. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, may your ego find balance between pleasure and reality.